In the last episode, we talked about Cyprus, a modern European country with modern banks and modern laws. And yet, almost overnight, ordinary people woke up to discover that part, and in some cases a significant part, of their savings was simply gone. Not stolen by criminals, not lost to bad investments, but taken legally through a bank bail-in. That moment revealed a brutal truth. A bank's promise is only as strong as the government standing behind it. This video is part of the series, Your Money in the Bank Isn't Yours. A quick note before we continue. This channel now hosts the English version of the series. If you're looking for the French version, you'll find it on our sister channel, BFR Consult FR. The link is below. Now let's continue. Today we thought we were going to explain currency collapse. That was the original plan. In earlier episodes, we described fractional reserve banking as a powerful form of leverage, a system where modern money is created primarily through debt and expanded through the banking system. We also showed how bail-ins are not accidents, but legal tools embedded into the financial architecture of many G20 countries. So the next logical step seemed obvious: currency collapse. As we started unfolding the story, we realized something extremely important. The political chaos we see around the world, trade tensions, tariff wars, shifting alliances, the end of quantitative easing, may not be the main story. They may be symptoms. While public attention is fixed on the noise, the monetary system is quietly being re-engineered. Not to save the old form of money, but to mutate it into a new monetary architecture. Let Ian continue with his personal experience from the previous episode.
What shocked me wasn't just that bail-ins exist, it was that ordinary people can have their savings legally confiscated to rescue large financial institutions, and that this framework is now written into the law across much of the developed world. But as I continued my research, I realized something even more unsettling. If the money in the bank isn't truly yours, then money itself, whether inside the bank or outside it, can lose its value entirely. That's what we call a currency collapse. But here's where our thinking changed. A currency collapse isn't simply about banks failing. It's not just about governments making bad decisions. It's about a breakdown of trust in the money itself. Money that isn't backed by something tangible, but by collective trust in the system that issues it. And that leads to an uncomfortable reality. Even if your bank account is never frozen, even if no one ever seizes your deposits, the number in your bank account may stay the same, but what it can buy can collapse. Savings aren't always destroyed by being taken away. Sometimes they're destroyed by becoming worthless. What shook me wasn't that this is some rare or exotic risk like bail-ins once seemed to be. It's that over long periods of time, history shows this pattern again and again. Therefore, I did what most people never do, or at least what they don't do until it's far too late. I went back to history.
Before we talk about how currencies die, and why they can appear stable right up until the moment they change, we need to address something important. Most books and videos about money focus almost exclusively on the death of currencies. What they often miss is that a currency failure is not a single, distinct event, and it is almost never a clean ending. More often, it is a transformation, what Ian describes as a death followed by a resurrection, or a near-death that leads to mutation. Indeed, a currency can collapse and be reborn under a new name, as Germany's Reichsmark was after hyperinflation, replaced by the Deutsche Mark in 1948. A currency can also lose credibility entirely and be replaced by a foreign currency, most often the US dollar, a process known as dollarization, as seen in Ecuador and El Salvador. Or it can be reset, reissued as a new version of itself to erase past failures and restore confidence. History is full of examples. the new French franc, the new Turkish lira, the new Romanian lei, the new Ghanaian cedi. There is also another category altogether, replacement without collapse. The euro, for example, absorbed national currencies across Europe, the franc, the mark, the lira, into a single monetary framework. In none of these cases did money simply disappear. It was rebranded, redenominated, or absorbed into something new. That is why history can be a dangerous teacher if we look at it too narrowly. If we focus only on how currencies die, we miss the far more important lesson: how money mutates. And today, the forces shaping that mutation, geopolitical tension, monetary experimentation, the retreat from quantitative easing, digital infrastructure, and financial fragmentation, are more powerful and more coordinated than at any point in modern history. This is not just another story about currency collapse. It may be the most profound transformation of money we have ever witnessed. Only then does the rest of this episode truly make sense. History teaches us that in the early 1920s, the German papier mark spiraled into a hyperinflation so severe that prices doubled within hours, not days. By the peak in late 1923, a loaf of bread that cost a few hundred marks in January was being quoted in the hundreds of billions by November. Again, history teaches us that in Zimbabwe in the late 2000s, government policies and economic mismanagement triggered one of the most extreme modern inflations, with prices rising so fast that the Zimbabwean dollar was effectively abandoned in favor of foreign currencies. In Venezuela, persistent hyperinflation forced repeated redenominations and widespread use of US dollars and other foreign currencies for everyday transactions. Other examples, from Argentina to Lebanon to Yugoslavia, show the same brutal pattern. When trust collapses, value vanishes. The numbers in your bank account might stay the same, but their power to buy disappears. This isn't ancient history. It's not a theory. It's happening right now in real time across the globe.
And this is the uncomfortable part. This isn't about one or two badly managed nations. This is about fiat money itself. Money backed not by something tangible, but by collective trust and confidence. Every modern fiat currency, from the US dollar to the British pound to the euro, exists on a timeline. They are maintained by public trust, economic output, and the institutions that issue them. We discussed earlier how modern money is created primarily through debt and expanded through the banking system when banks issue loans and create deposits. When debt grows faster than the real economy that supports it, fragility builds. When public confidence erodes, money stops functioning as an effective store of value, even if it continues to circulate as a medium of exchange for a while longer, right up until it starts losing its value by the hour. No system like this is permanent. Every timeline eventually reaches an end. As financial historian Jim Rickards once put it, how many paper currencies have gone to zero? The answer is all of them. This isn't a sensational claim. It's a pattern repeated across centuries of monetary history.
This video isn't here to scare you. It's here to give you clarity and answer questions most people never ask until it's too late. What does a currency collapse really look like? When can we say a currency has truly failed? Can it happen in a world with multiple currencies? Is the US dollar different or just bigger? And most importantly, how can ordinary people protect themselves?
Welcome back. This is episode 6 of our 10-part series, Your Money in the Bank Isn't Yours. Today, we're tackling a topic that goes beyond bank bail-ins, currency collapse, and the transformation of money itself. If you missed episodes 1 to 5, no worries. The links are in the description and popping up on the screen now. Watching them will give you essential context on fractional reserve banking, how modern money is created, and why bail-ins are now embedded in law in many G20 nations. Every like, share, and comment helps us release the rest of the series faster and build a community that understands the hidden risks and structural mechanics in modern money. And as with every episode, we highlight one of the 10 essential books that shaped our approach to financial independence. Not just theory, but strategies that real-world investors use. In our last episode, episode 5, we explored The Millionaire Next Door by Thomas J. Stanley and William D. Danko, the classic guide that reveals the surprisingly simple habits of ordinary people who build extraordinary wealth. Stick with us until the end. In this episode, we're exploring what a real currency collapse truly looks like and why even safe fiat currencies, like the dollar or the Swiss franc, can be vulnerable. Most importantly, we will show you practical steps ordinary people can take to protect their savings. So hit subscribe and let's dive into the stark realities of money itself. What it can really do and what happens when trust in it erodes.
Most people imagine a currency collapse as a single cataclysmic day when their country or the world comes to an end. In reality, it's a process, gradual deterioration over decades, followed by an extremely rapid phase over months. Years of structural damage silently accumulate until the final implosion happens in mere hours. But it's the catastrophic fracture in confidence. The moment the population collectively realizes the government's promises are broken and the numbers in their bank accounts are no longer real, that forms the switch to the ultimate collapse. Once that psychological switch flips, the collapse becomes an uncontainable exponential slide. However, governments are rarely caught off guard. They can anticipate the collapse, quietly preparing the mutation to a new currency while the old one is still in its death throes. But here is the biggest surprise. This transition is always accompanied by a massive transfer of wealth. While the majority are wiped out, a few, those who recognize the signs and prepare in advance, don't just survive, they thrive. As the old currency crumbles, the wealth doesn't vanish, it simply changes hands. And if the wealth transfer is the result, then we must learn to recognize the symptoms that lead to it. History, from the ruins of 1946 Hungary to the modern streets of Istanbul, shows us 3 unmistakable signs that a currency is entering its death throes. Symptom 1. The price illusion. When a currency loses its store of value, the government's first instinct is not to fix the money, but to hide the damage. They implement price repression. Ask yourself, why are we seeing a sudden push in the US to cap credit card interest rates or investigate grocery pricing? On the surface, it looks like a gift to the consumer. But in the grammar of economic history, it is a desperate attempt to cap the fever of a potentially dying currency. When a state begins to dictate the price of money and goods, it's because they can no longer control the value of the currency itself. Symptom 2. The invisible fence. As the stampede for safer or better currencies begins, the state deploys capital controls. They don't want your wealth to leave the system. Look at Europe today. Under the guise of anti-money laundering, we are seeing the fence being built in real time. New EU regulations are pushing for a strictly monitored ceiling on cash, with some countries already limiting you to spending as little as 1,000 or 3,000 euros of your own physical money. But the fence goes higher. The coming digital euro, or CBDC, isn't just about convenience, it's about programmability. It gives the state the power to decide not just how much you can spend, but what you can spend it on, and even where it's allowed to go. This is the invisible fence being built around your savings. They are narrowing the exits, making sure that when the old currency begins its final slide, your wealth is trapped inside the digital ledger, unable to escape into exit assets like gold or offshore accounts without their express permission. Symptom 3. the black market pulse. Eventually, the official rate becomes a total fantasy. When people see a wide gap between what the bank says their money is worth and what it actually buys on the street, they turn to the black market. It becomes the only place where the economy still speaks the truth. But at this stage, if you are not already prepared, it will be too late. Trust in the money has evaporated. You see, a currency is more than just a medium of exchange. It is a social contract, the invisible glue that holds a civilization together. When that contract is torn up, the glue dissolves. As the social fabric frays, we see the same tragic results across history: a surge in criminality, widespread social unrest, and mass migration as people flee the wreckage in search of stability. When the money breaks, the society follows. If you think a digital economy will be safer, you're mistaken. Stick with us, because next, we are revealing the digital ghost town, a modern equivalent to empty shelves. It's a reality that can freeze your life in place without a single person ever hitting the streets. Throughout the centuries, there have been many global reserve currencies: the Portuguese cruzado, the Spanish real, the Dutch guilder, the French franc, and most recently, the British pound. Think of a global reserve currency as a universal currency, the primary currency that nations and corporations choose to hold in vast quantities for international trade and global payments. For over a century, roughly from 1815 to 1920, the British pound was that universal currency. London was the world's financial heart, and the pound was backed by the gold standard and the sheer reach of the British Empire. But the cost of empire is high. Britain became engulfed in debt, a burden that grew exponentially after the First and Second World Wars. By 1944, with Europe and Japan in ruins, delegates from 44 nations met at Bretton Woods to design a new world. They officially established the US dollar as the world's anchor. That dollar was pegged to gold at $35 per ounce, while every other currency was pegged to the dollar. For the first time, the world had a single golden bridge to stability. But there is a catch. The US dollar note of 1944 may have the same face as the dollar today, but from a value perspective, it is not the same currency. In 1971, the US officially depegged the dollar from gold. Since that moment, the currency has lost approximately 99% of its value against the very asset that once anchored it. Most people don't realize this because a currency collapse isn't a sudden explosion, as we previously explained. It's a slow, silent erosion that happens over decades, a theft of time and labor so gradual that the victim never thinks to scream. Just like the British pound before it, the United States has now reached a level of debt that can no longer be repaid. As of 2026, the US national debt sits at a staggering $38 trillion, a debt-to-GDP ratio of 124%. The US has entered the debt trap, where it must borrow more money just to pay the interest on the money it already owes. History tells us exactly what happens next. When an empire can no longer pay its bills, it doesn't just go bankrupt, it mutates the currency to wipe the slate clean. But this debt doesn't just stay in America, it forces a chain reaction across the globe. To stay competitive, other countries are forced to intentionally devalue their own money just to keep up with the falling dollar. Think of it as a race to the bottom. No nation wants its currency to be too strong, because that makes their exports too expensive and their debts impossible to pay. So they all begin to melt down their currencies at the same time. This isn't just a crisis for one country, it's a global competition that destroys purchasing power at record speed, leaving you, the worker and the saver, caught in the crossfire, regardless of where you live on the planet. But let's refocus on the US dollar for a moment. In 2026, it is still the global reserve currency, but it is caught in a special kind of trap. For years, we've looked to the past to understand collapsing currencies. But the end of the dollar as we know it, or rather, the mutation of the dollar, won't be noisy, it will be silent. Right now, 134 countries, representing a staggering 98% of global GDP, are launching or piloting their own CBDCs. They are mutating their money into a digital cage. But the United States is the massive exception. Instead of a government-run app, the US is using the Genius Act of 2025 to let private companies build the architecture for them. It is a public-private bridge. The US is empowering stablecoin giants like Tether, Circle, Ripple, and PayPal to become the global delivery system for the dollar. But make no mistake, the Genius Act ensures the state keeps the keys to the toll booth. By law, these private issuers must provide the technological capability to seize, freeze, or burn assets at the flip of a digital switch. Why would a government use it? To stop capital flight. In a currency collapse, the state's greatest enemy is you, trying to save your family by moving your wealth into assets that protect against currency devaluation. They don't need to lock the bank doors anymore. They simply reprogram the money. They can tag your credits as non-transferable or freeze your access to safe haven assets in milliseconds. The bridges are no longer just paths. They have become gates, and the gatekeepers only let through those who follow the rules of the collapse. Wheelbarrows full of worthless paper notes are a thing of the past. Today, the usage of physical cash is being strangled to the point of elimination. Ironically, they call this digital inclusion, but we prefer a more honest term, the digital ghost town. If you think this is an exaggeration, look at the social credit system in China. They proved that you don't need to control a person's thoughts to control their behavior. You only need to control their access to and the usage of their own money. Stick with us, because next, we reveal why a government guarantee on your bank deposit is a worthless shield in the currency meltdown of a digital ghost town system. We've seen how, in a cash society, shelves can empty during a currency collapse, notes become worthless, and the glue of society dissolves, a silent tragedy of nations losing their pulse in a race to the currency bottom. But the real question isn't about the past, it's about you. How can ordinary people protect themselves before the numbers in their bank accounts become meaningless digital ghosts? Here is Ian with his thoughts.
Historical evidence shows that during a currency collapse, wealth doesn't disappear, it migrates. It moves from paper promises to tangible items of intrinsic value. But in a cashless society, when everything becomes tokenized, the ordinary person will have a hard time recognizing which assets have intrinsic value and can shield them from digital money printing and tokenomics. So I encourage you to subscribe to this channel. Our mission is to guide you through this turbulent and unique time. We are witnessing the greatest currency mutation the world has ever experienced. Our goal is to show you not only how to survive, but how to thrive in a world that will inevitably token itself. When everything becomes tokenized, the banks won't just want to custody your money. They'll want to custody your digital assets as well, unless of course you decide otherwise. In the next episode, we'll show you why your bank deposit guarantee isn't what you think it is, and the clever ways banks are luring people into surrendering their crypto for safety. In the meantime, if you haven't seen it yet, watch our 2025 deep dive. Are US and European banks preparing to hold your crypto by 2026?
But as usual, we can't end this episode without our special book recommendation. Originally, we intended to propose The Little Book of Common Sense Investing by John C. Bogle. Bogle's philosophy was simple. Don't look for the needle in the haystack, just buy the haystack. He proved that indexing, betting on the collective productivity of the S&P 500, was safer and more profitable than trying to pick a single winning stock. But Bogle lived in a world of traditional stocks and bonds. He didn't live in a world of tokenomics and algorithmic stablecoins. Indexing only works when the underlying assets have intrinsic value. In a chaotic transition like the one we are entering, the haystack is being filled with companies that only exist because of cheap debt and government bailouts. In a world of currency mutation, buying the whole haystack might just mean you're buying a pile of rot. Does it mean you're missing out on one book? Not at all. Actually, we would like to write a special purpose book for you. A book that will guide you through digital financial revolution that we are currently going through. If you find this idea attractive, write book in the comment section. Finally, we leave you with the visionary words of Mark Yusko. He is the founder, CEO, and Chief Investment Officer of Morgan Creek Capital Management, an asset management and advisory firm that oversees billions of dollars in assets.
But every stock, every bond, every currency, every commodity, every piece of art, every private business, every piece of real estate will eventually be a token on a blockchain.
See you in the next one.